Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Still at my house for right now, and hopefully wherever you are, be it your own home, that's where you're working from, or in your office, gym, this is DawgNation, our show. Hopefully you are enjoying this holiday season and looking forward to what should be a very interesting and strong conclusion to Georgia's 2020 season. We'll talk more about that before we're done on today's show. But I do want to begin with a little bit of news on the recruiting trail. And this is that time of the year where a lot of those big announcements start to take place and some of those big pieces start to fall into place for Georgia's 2021 recruiting class. And tomorrow, right here during this time, we'll be lucky enough to provide you live coverage during DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Tomorrow during this time, four-star defensive back there at his high school, Nyland Green, he is going to make his college decision, and we'll get a chance to follow all of that with you. Green on social media yesterday kind of made the announcement. I'll show you this on the screen of the big. It was an announcement of an announcement. If you follow me on that, of the big announcement that he'll make tomorrow. That's Tuesday at 10 a.m. about his college choice. Green letting us know and inviting all of us, whether it be for a few folks there in person or virtually for the rest of us, a chance to join him in making that decision. Obviously, over the course of the last 24 hours or so, Georgia fans have had a little bit of a curiosity about this, about what he's going to do. In fact, I want to show you a picture on the screen that Green also recently released of kind of a setup for the decision. And here's one of the things you're going to see. You're going to see his family kind of sitting on kind of a sectional couch together. Everyone's got the question mark shirts on. You can see this on the screen in front of you. And the hats that you see there, you see the Clemson hat, you see an Alabama hat, you see an Oregon hat, you see a Tennessee hat. And in place of what we would expect to see a UGA hat, you see a Georgia State hat. Now, this would appear to be, I guess, if you're making the assumption, kind of an elaborate troll attempt on the part of Green. Maybe better said, just having some fun with people who are, quite curious about what his ultimate college decision is going to be. But with the announcement set to come on Tuesday morning, a little bit of a weekend of subterfuge, or whatever you want to call it, about maybe making Georgia fans wonder, are you really in this thing? Does Georgia really have a chance there at Nyland Green? So Green enjoying his recruiting process, and in a weird 2021 cycle where recruits haven't got a chance to take the visits and haven't gotten a chance to do some of the things they want to do, having a little fun ahead of their announcement. I don't know that anyone can necessarily fault Nyland Green for that. And of course, Green is a big potential get for Georgia's class of 2021, but there's also some significant competition here as well. At one point in time, we've talked about schools like Tennessee and others, but it seems like Tennessee has probably fallen by the wayside here a little bit, not just in Green's recruitment, but with its overall recruitment. You think about, Terrence Lewis, who recently just decommitted. They've had other high-profile decommitments. The on-field problems that Tennessee has displayed has seemingly impacted the trajectory of their 2021 recruiting class. To this point in time, you're left to wonder, well, how really in it is a school like Tennessee for Nyland Green, which would potentially stand to be good news for Georgia. But while a school like Tennessee seems to be falling back to the pack, there is admittedly a little talk about a school like Clemson, suddenly joining a school like Georgia as a real formidable challenge here. I thought it was interesting. If you want to go back to Friday on our program, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, DawgNation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel, made the appearance. We talked about Nyland Green, and in the midst of discussing Green as a big-time prospect and a very important need for Georgia in a year when it's expected to lose some of its heavily contributing defensive backs, Jeff did acknowledge that you got to be a little bit careful with the emergence of Clemson here as a real threat to Green. So as a preview of what Nyland's going to do tomorrow with his announcement, let me let you hear Jeff Sintel from Friday on that topic. Take a listen to this.
We should say that the most likely scenario is no more Mark Webb, no more Richard LeCount. Same thing for Tyson Campbell, same thing for Eric Stokes, same thing for DJ Daniel. That's why Nyland Green is really attractive to Georgia and vice versa. He's a guy, great ball skills, big guy. 24/7 Sports has him rated as the number 2 overall cornerback prospect. Some guys look at him and see star, see safety. Nyland wants to be a cornerback. That's where Georgia and Clemson are recruiting him as a play corner. He'd be a big corner at about 6'3", 195 pounds. Man, I just think he's vital. I think this is one of those things where you have to kind of hunker down a little bit on Nyland Green, because that's the school. If he chooses Clemson, everybody's going to go, yeah, Clemson, we get it. even with those departures from Georgia's defensive backfield.
So fair and balanced, so to speak, with Jeff mentioning the fact that Clemson potentially looms as a pretty significant threat to Nyland Green, or for Nyland Green here, and Georgia fans should be aware of that when Green gets ready to make his announcement coming up on Tuesday morning. But the flip side of this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of Georgia fans do feel good, but the chances that Nyland Green announces for UGA on Tuesday is the fact that there is a long established relationship in place with the Dogs and Green. And in fact, one more here from Jeff Sintel. I love the way that Jeff describes the nature of UGA's relationship with Nyland Green. Take a listen and hear it for yourself.
You know, it's the hometown thing. There's the connection there with Eric Stokes from the same community. I think the way that Nyland Green has spoken about Georgia for the last 6-7 months, I think it's really genuine. He's a smiling kid. He always has a big smile on his face. But for me, when I listen to Nyland Green, he brings up how much him and Charlton Warren always talk about shoes. You know, there's a genuine connection here.
So you love the idea of the genuine connection. You love the idea of the bond that Green has seemingly formed with Charlton Warren, his defensive backs coach or potential defensive backs coach at Georgia. And that's something for you to feel good about there with Green set to go on Tuesday. The other thing to remember here is like a lot of years, maybe more so in 2021 in some respects, is that, you know, different recruits seem to also impact others. A lot of folks will remember the other day with Nyland Green saying after a big Twitter highlight was shared of Mason Smith, oh, I'd like to play with that guy in school. That there is a thought that Green has a potential connection to Smith and Smith has potential connection to other recruits, and that these bonds they've kind of formed across, you know, paths with each other, that it's another reason why Georgia fans will be watching the Nyland Green commitment so closely tomorrow, because of what that potentially means for other big-time gets in this class of 2021. Certainly something to pay attention to there. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I'm glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, including from my home here on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, of course, radio on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep, as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Happy to have all of you with us here today. Big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia, making it all possible. You know, when I sit here in my house, when it's still kind of a colder day outside, you know, I do love the way in which the heat that we have on, the fire from the fireplace, all of that energy stays inside of our house because of energy-efficient windows and doors. And if you're worried about some of the energy that you have creeping out of the crevices in your windows and doors this time of year, it's one of the reasons why you need to put Pella Window and Door of Georgia to work for you. And not only can they help you potentially save you some money on your energy bills, it can also increase the curb appeal of your home there as well. They've got great savings too. Between now and January 7th, you can get 50% off qualifying installations or no payments, no interest for 18 months. Great savings there from Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Find them online at PellaBranch.com. That's PellaBranch.com, or give them a call, and they're done with each showroom at 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979. Pella Window of Georgia is viewed to be the best. I'm going to get John Stinchcomb here in just 1 minute. He's going to join us here as we go Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with him, courtesy of our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. Before I do that, though, I do want to set up the conversation with John by giving you a little bit of a look ahead to Georgia's upcoming opponent this Saturday. You know, at one point in time, in fact, we'll do this as an Around the Doghouse here, assisted today by AAA. At one point in time, when you looked at those games for Georgia after the Florida game, I think the thing that you were left with was, well, gosh, Georgia just doesn't have a very interesting game left on its schedule. You're going to have to really kind of conjure up any kind of interest in these games whatsoever. You're going to have to pretend that the games maybe mean more than they do. Well, on the basis of what we saw on Saturday, Missouri getting another win, this time over its hated battle line rival Arkansas, all of a sudden it's a little bit easier to start imagining Georgia's game in Columbia against Missouri on Saturday as a little bit bigger game and a little bit better measuring stick for any kind of improvement Georgia's showing at the end of the season. The game against Missouri, after putting up 50 points against Barry Odom's Arkansas defense, all of a sudden feels a little more interesting in that regard. So before we talk to John Stinchcomb about this, let you, as a part of Around the Doghouse, assisted by AAA, let you hear from the coach that Georgia will battle with on Saturday, Missouri's Eli Drinkwitz, talking about a huge rivalry win and what essentially preserves a non-losing season in Drinkwitz's first year, almost certainly something that very few people saw coming. Here is Eli Drinkwitz, who will be on the other sideline from Georgia on Saturday. Take a listen to this.
I don't necessarily like the term, change the culture. I just think we've instilled a belief and an identity of who we are and what we're going to be about. And like I've said before, that's not for everybody, and that's okay. But as long as we're here, we're going to be about these things. We're going to have a standard of performance. We're going to have a 1-0 mentality. We're going to have an always compete mindset. We're going to build trust and respect. We're going to do more than what's expected. We got a lot more to do. Appreciate the administration believing in me and believing in our staff and continue to push forward. I know, Mizzou Nation is getting excited about what we're doing. Recruits are taking notice, and we're not done yet.
So great stuff to hear there from Missouri coach Eli Drinkwitz. At least great if you're a Missouri fan after what they did on Saturday, and a very interesting test for Georgia coming up here this weekend after not getting a chance to play against Vanderbilt this past Saturday. We'll talk about both those subjects and more with John Stinchcomb coming up. Before that, though, let me remind you that was Around the Dawghouse, assisted today by our friends at AAA. And, of course, AAA, known for its legendary roadside assistance, but also known for the ways in which it can save you money. And one of the ways they can do that is with the AAA Savings Hack Pack. It's a combination of benefits that's worth over $1,000. It includes free career assistance, identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, and, of course, discounts on food and essentials as well. It is a part of every AAA membership, so please check out this website. It's AAA.com/Go Savings. That's AAA.com/Go Savings. That'll get you in touch with AAA today, and you can find out about all the benefits that come from the AAA Savings Hack Pack. All right, we are here still at my home, but lucky enough, through the magic of video teleconference, I can still bring in John Stinchcomb, and a chance to do that right now as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. When we, first looked ahead to this conversation, obviously John and I would have assumed that we would be talking about the game against Vanderbilt from this past Saturday. That didn't happen. We will talk about why in a moment. But John, first of all, as I say, good morning and thanks for your time today. As always, you heard Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach there a moment ago. This is one of the SEC's real surprises. And listen, I don't think that that Sam Pittman should apologize for the way that his team played on Saturday. They didn't have Felipe Franks, the regular starting quarterback. They went on the road. They gave it a game effort against Missouri. But what Eli Drinkwitz has done there with the Tigers in Como this year has really been pretty impressive. And suddenly what a series of games for Georgia that kind of looked nondescript and, frankly, not all that much to think about. All of a sudden now you see a Missouri team that's won 5 times, scored 50 points against, a defensive coordinator in Barry Odom that has had a sensational year. And Missouri as a measuring stick for Georgia this upcoming Saturday, all of a sudden to me, that seems like a lot more legitimate conversation.
This game has become so much more compelling for a number of reasons. Not only has Missouri looked like a much more worthy opponent than they were on paper at the beginning of the year, but I think the excitement of JT Daniels and what this offense looks like is much different. You almost split the season up into 2 pieces, and Mississippi State and a couple of weeks ago against South Carolina. How do we finish against Missouri and Vandy? I think that's a better gauge of where we're at and where we're going, more so than what we had beforehand, which was some uncertainty, to say the least. But this game has become something that I think most Georgia fans are going to want to tune into and participate in and cheer on, because it's a much better matchup. Missouri is proven to be a little more capable than I think they were given early on in the season. And I can't wait to see what this offense does against a team that plays a little bit better. I mean, South Carolina was exciting to watch, but let's be honest, that team was so dilapidated and debilitated that it wasn't a great measuring stick of where we're really at and where we can get.
John, I'm kind of glad about this. I mean, not that I would root for Sam Pittman almost any game. Not to say that I was necessarily rooting for Missouri on Saturday, but when they do go out and win, I'm glad that it makes the game this upcoming Saturday mean a little bit more. I'll give you a comparison, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but in 2011, Georgia lost to Boise State to begin the season, lost to South Carolina the following week, and won every game for the rest of the regular season. And the problem was all the games that Georgia played after that were nowhere near the level of opponent that Georgia played. At that time, South Carolina was a very good team. Boise State, obviously, have been a fixture in the top 25. And so, you on the one hand, you can say, well, Georgia, after losing 2 straight to start the year, 1-10 straight to finish the year, what a turnaround for the Dogs. But admittedly, there was also this thing of, well, each and every one of these opponents is a far cry from the level of competition that Georgia got in week 1 and week 2. I think the average fan was left to wonder, well, how much improvement did Georgia really show, and how much of this was just a major step down in weight class in terms of the competition the rest of the season. And there's a way in which you could have looked at Mississippi State, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, assuming they can scrape a team together, Missouri, and left to wonder, well, is this evidence of maybe Georgia showing some needed improvement, or is this just Georgia not playing a Florida, not playing in Alabama? I'm not telling you that Missouri, and I know you will agree with this too, I'm not telling you that Missouri is in the class, Missouri is in the class of a Florida and Alabama, but it's a class above what Georgia has been playing over the last couple of weeks, and from that standpoint, at least a decent little measuring stick.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that's what the anticipation was when you see an all SEC schedule. I mean, you're not playing the we'll pay you games where teams are coming to town just because they're collecting a paycheck. I think the expectations were you're going to play some elite in Alabama and surprisingly Florida this year. I think we all thought Florida was going to be better and a worthy opponent. We didn't know that they would be on a run that they're currently taking. And sadly to say, they're looking pretty good. A possible Heisman Trophy candidate at the quarterback position. But when you look at the SEC, all SEC schedule, I think the expectation was there were going to be fewer dogs on the calendar. I mean, fewer times where you go within the first 15 minutes, this game should be over if we even have to pay attention that long. And Missouri has proven that they are that step up in caliber and opponent than what we've seen in years past with some of the just freebies that you get and some of the ones that, quite honestly, I expected a better year from South Carolina. They were dealing with such issues that they weren't much of an opponent. And candidly, Vanderbilt probably falls in that same category, 0-win team with a new head coach. But this Missouri game, that's different. I mean, I think you laid it out pretty well. This isn't a bottom dweller. This is a team that's arrow is up and has put together some solid performances, which they are not an elite top 10 team, but they're a much more worthy opponent than what we could have experienced and should make for a good matchup on Saturday.
It's our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Happy to have John Stinchko on the program here today. Let me turn my attention now to what didn't happen on Saturday, which was Georgia's game against Vanderbilt. Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity, some pretty pointed comments. Folks can read those at DawgNation.com. His dissatisfaction with, what we presume is Vanderbilt's inability to kind of follow some of the same processes that Georgia's been able to follow. And, John, when I said on Twitter about this on Friday, and I'll stand by this now, if we find out that Vanderbilt, missed the game on Saturday because of a series of positive tests, then there's very, very little criticism that's going to come the way of Vanderbilt for that because there's only so much you can do to mitigate against that. I certainly understand all of that. Yet at the beginning of the week, there were all kinds of rumors about potential opt-outs, maybe as many as 6 and 7 had been kicked around in the national media about what Vanderbilt was facing related to the firing of Derek Mason and maybe some other issues around the program that we were at the beginning of the week talking about potentially another round of Vanderbilt opt-outs after they'd had 10 already, prior to that, or at least I think that was what the reported number had been. Do you understand the frustration that McGarity has shown, that other Georgia fans have shown about, Vanderbilt just kind of not able to get it together, find a way to play this game this past Saturday against Georgia?
Absolutely. I find it infuriating. I feel the frustration of the players and the coaches that to play this game this year, it takes an amazing level of sacrifice. And you're willing to do that with the expectation that your opponent is taking those same steps to ensure that a game is played. And when you get this close and you find out that whether there are positive tests or there just weren't that safety protocol, I'm sure we're not alone in that there are more secondary isolation situations where you may have come in contact, so you need to isolate. Well, for these college players, they have been forced all year long to avoid situations that would expose them to having missed opportunities to get out on the field, which ultimately, I think that's what we need to get back to. The perception that for most of these players, they desire playing football. I mean, I can't think of very many teammates that didn't love the game and want to go out there and compete and play. And if you were to say, hey, we're just, we're not going to allow you, there's not going to be an opportunity for you to play this game, it would be like, hey, I'm going to cut your leg off. How do you feel about that? I mean, there's a pain that comes with not being able to play the game. And, sadly, I think there's this infiltration of mindset that some people are willing to abandon a game that I think should be played for passion. And yes, for a lot of people, there's opportunities to go play for money, and that's a great thing. I was a beneficiary of that very opportunity, but at the end of the day, it was getting paid to play a game that we love very dearly. And if there's not that passion, then you might be in the wrong spot.
Yeah, listen, I mean, no one's saying that Vanderbilt should tell players who may have tested positive for coronavirus to rub some dirt on it. That's not what anybody's saying. But there were reports out of Columbia, South Carolina this week that for the Gamecocks game against Kentucky, they played the game with 16 defensive players. They had 16 available defense, at least according to one report that I saw on Twitter. They're essentially playing with 5 defensive subs across the board. We know that when Mississippi State came to Georgia a couple of weeks ago, they came with 40-something scholarship players, and they chose to play the game, anyway. It seems like that there are ways to kind of go about doing this if that's what you want to do. And beyond that, John, if the firing of Derek Mason potentially, and we're never going to really know this because it doesn't seem like anyone's going to do any reporting on it, but if the firing of Derek Mason led to more opt-outs that made it impossible for Georgia to play its game against Vanderbilt on Saturday, then I think it's fair to ask, what do you get for firing him during the season anyway? I mean, all of this is such a house of cards right now because let's face it, the virus is creating unprecedented challenges. I think we all understand and respect that. But when you're kind of teetering on the brink as it is, how much of a benefit do you get for firing Derek Mason now as opposed to letting the season play out and then just doing it then? It's not like recruiting's going to be benefited that much one way or another. That's part of the frustration level that I have.
Yeah. And, candidly, I might sound like the get off my lawn old man, but we're getting to this point where for years we've seen coaches move on before the season's played out, and they either get fired or they find a new job, mainly because there's a job available, meaning somebody else got fired.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing players do the same thing where they're opting out or waiting. I'm going to forego the rest of my eligibility. I've done enough at this level, as if it's just a stepping stone and that's all there is to it. I really hope, for the sake of the quality of college football and really college athletics across the board, that something changes, that whether it's there's no hiring and firing, there's a freeze during the season. Let's at least play out the regular season before these situations occur, because there is an absolutely visible degradation of the quality of product that colleges are putting out there, because we're not having the same teams play that start the year and finish. And it's not due to injury. It's not due to performance. It's guys, either players or coaches, that are choosing to no longer play. That's beside the point with COVID. Like COVID that's its own animal. This year is obviously unprecedented. There's a number of situations that have occurred where teams have either powered their way through or fought. Think of the Denver Broncos playing without a quarterback.
That's right.
Mississippi State, less than 50 guys, and they're like, hey, we're going to play. So there are places out there that are willing to say, hey, we're stepping into this gap despite the pandemic, and we're trying to do the right things. But there is a definite undercurrent in sports today that is independent of the pandemic, that is cancerous to the culture of quality sports. And that's giving up or quitting on your team. It is a selfish act. Either, in Vanderbilt's case, that's the administration saying, hey, we're giving up on Derek Mason before the season is over. And that's been prevalent in sports for a long time. I think that's something that needs to get looked at and addressed.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I really agree with everything you're saying there. It's our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb. Let me remind you that Marlowe's is a great choice this holiday season. We only have people on our list to buy for, even in a year like this when we're probably not out and shopping maybe as much as we have in the past. But one of the great things about Marlowe's Tavern is the ease with which you can buy for the people on your list who are kind of hard to shop for, including a Marlowe's Tavern gift card. This is great savings right now because when you buy a $50 Marlowe's Tavern gift card, they're going to give you complimentary a bottle of Michelle Brut sparkling wine. It's a great way to kind of ring in the new year and put 2020 in the rearview mirror, which I know a lot of us are very much looking forward to do and thinking about a better 2021. The Michelle Brut sparkling wine, a great way to toast that brand new year. And it'll be a complimentary gift to you when you buy a $50 gift card from our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. But even better than that, when you get a $100 gift card from Marlowe's Tavern, not only do you get the Michelle Brut sparkling wine, you also get a bonus $20 gift card there as well. Maybe you use that on yourself. It's a great, great opportunity from our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. Make sure you check that out as we head towards the holiday season. And as I said before, it's great to have John Stinchcomb as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. John, we talked last week on our DawgNation Happy Hour when we thought we were going to be seeing Georgia against Vanderbilt about what could be a little bit of a new look Georgia offensive line. The reports are that TREY has dealt with some knee surgery. He's going to be out the rest of this season, which kind of slides Warren Erickson into that center spot. For the people who didn't get a chance to see us talk about that on this past week, what do you think the potential change from Hill to Erickson potentially means for the rest of the offensive line and really the Georgia offense overall?
Well, if there's one silver lining to the cancellation of this past game, it's extra practice time for this group. And Warren Erickson is a guy who's had his reps, but they've mostly come at guard. And when you have a new center in the middle of the season, every rep counts just to get on the same page, to get the feel. There's a gel between the positions that has to occur. And when you have an additional 5 days of practice, that really matters. I think you lose a player of TREY's quality, there's going to be an effect that's felt in this offense. His ability in the run game to create space is pretty unique. You don't see a lot of centers move nose guards the way TREY has and continues to do through this season. But Warren is a capable backup. I mean, it's funny because at the end of last season, we're looking at that Sugar Bowl, and there's a number of new faces that are getting their opportunity. And there wasn't a great deal of drop off when Warren was one of the few, him and Jamari Sawyer at the time, first time like really starting, and there wasn't a drop off in play. So I expect with this extra week of practice that Warren's going to be able to step in, and there's not going to be, for the average fan, that big of difference, hopefully, in performance from that front five, because they've had some up and down performances, but overall a really solid year.
I want to finish on this topic. Of course, Kirby Smart himself doesn't want to talk about this. He's kind of pushed back on some questions on this subject, but nonetheless, it is looming. This is the time of year in which a lot of Georgia players are about to make a decision about whether or not they want to return for another year at UGA or not. Now, typically, it's juniors we think about in this regard. It's also seniors right now, although the honest truth is I expect most of the seniors to probably move on from the Georgia program. Georgia just recruits the kinds of players who, for the most part, want to try the NFL and they get a chance to. And after 4 years, many of them, I'm sure, probably feel like they're ready to. So that's my best guess on that. But there could be one or two guys from that senior crop who decide to come back. There could be, some big decisions to be made for some of the juniors. I know that DJ Daniel just accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl. That would seem to indicate that he's ready to move on with the next phase of his life here. John, my question is, as a guy who, went on to the NFL, obviously did it after your senior year was done at Georgia, what is the decision-making process like for these players? And I guess in addition to that, why do you think it is that Georgia has had a little bit of difficulty the last couple of years in convincing players who would not be first-round picks to come back to Athens, as opposed to, moving on the NFL, which a lot of, not first-round type guys have chosen to do around Georgia the last couple of years?
Well, I'm going to venture into the world of speculation for a minute, but correct me if I'm wrong here, BA. This next offseason will be the first where players can transfer one-time penalty-free, correct?
Sure.
So that's almost a Wild West situation. If you don't like your playing time, or if you don't like the way your prospects look, or how it's played out, or your position coach, or fill in the blank, now is an opportunity for guys to kind of hit that reset button and bounce from one place to another. I can't wait to see the way that plays out. I think we've already seen with fifth-year seniors, TREY McKitty is an example that pops to mind this year, where guys can transfer. Jamie Newman was going to be one, but now it's pretty much opened up to any player. It's a bizarre relationship between players and their team more than anything. When you start talking about really good teams, and I'm going to reflect on a personal level. Those teams were sacrificial. They were very selfless and willing to put big team over me, right? You put it on the shirt and it meant something to you. Now, I don't know if that's the case in a lot of places. The four seniors that we continue to laud and lift up week in and week out, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Lorenzo Carter, and Davin Bellamy, from just a few years ago, were willing to say, I'm not done here yet. That this team at Georgia, we still have some work left to do. And I want to be a part of it, not just be the foundation from which other guys are launching themselves from, but I want to participate in something that's special. Now that takes a unique commitment. And here's where the speculation for me comes in, BA. What is the recruiting pitch, not just from Georgia, but across the board, that is getting players to your program? Are you selling your program as we are your stepping stone to getting paid for the job, for a job of playing football? Or is it, we think you're a great athlete, and given the opportunity, one day you're going to play professionally, but for this period of time, we want you to come to our university because we think something special is being created right here. I think those are two very different things. Now, it's all speculation. I don't know what's being sold to these families, to these players. And I don't think at all times they need to be independent of one another. I think you can sell the idea of, hey, we're creating a special environment here. We think you can be a cornerstone of it. We want to build. We want to shoot for national championships. We want to represent our conference on an annual basis. And we want you to be a part of it on your way to a career, a professional career in football, because you've got that talent, and we think we've got the staff that can help craft and create that special opportunity for you. Now, for some of these guys, it won't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're going to Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia. They are special, talented guys that, given that level of coaching, which you'll find about at any program across the board, they've got a future in professional sports. But I really do. I think it matters on the type guy that you're bringing in, not just a super talented player, but somebody who loves the University of Georgia. And for guys that are saying, I'm not done yet. There is a time and a place for me to move on and get paid for what I do. But for right now, I'm looking at the brothers in my room, in my locker room, and saying, I've committed to you, and I want to honor that, and I want to play it out.
John, I think that's well said. Good stuff all the way around. Thank you for being here as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. We'll look forward to catching up with you here on our program again soon. See if the Dog Nation Happy Hour coming up once again this Thursday afternoon. So enjoy your week, and we'll enjoy the chance to chat with you again very soon.
Looking forward to it. Go Dogs.
Great stuff there from John Stinchcomb, the great former Georgia All-American and a terrific voice around the Georgia program, really locked in on everything that's going on, and very well said from him all the way around there. Really good stuff. Let's transition here now, get ready to do our SEC through. And as we do, I'll give you a quick shout out to my friends at Classic City Lager. Of course, you hear me talk about them a lot. Just good cold beer, lager tasting beer, lager style beer, but no sacrifice on flavor. It's available in 6 and 12-pack cans wherever you shop, at whatever retailer you like to go to. You can find some Classic City Lager from my friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company. But also, don't forget this, the Classic City Lager is also a big part of the Dog Nation home gating channel. You've heard about that. This year, a lot of folks having to replace their normal tailgating experience with home gating. Well, right there at DawgNation.com, you can see more of the Dog Nation home gating channel. And, of course, Classic City Lager, a big part of that, and have been all year long. So big shout out to our friends there at Classic City Lager. All right, there is a lot of SEC through type stories to get to. Let me also squeeze this in really quick. This is not related to the SEC through. How about the game on Saturday, by the way, between BYU and Coastal Carolina? I thought it was the game of the year, and really, in many respects, one of the best sporting events of 2020, given how quickly it came together. given, BYU's decision to kind of come across country to play in the game. And really a great showing by Coastal there in Conway, South Carolina, looking like they were having a ton of fun and validating their ranking in a huge way. This was great for college football. It was a really great experience, down to the wire. Every play I thought was really entertaining. So big shout out to BYU and Coastal Carolina on short notice, putting together what I really think at this point in time stands as the game of the year in college football. Now, in the SEC, the big news today is that South Carolina has made it official. They have hired Shane Beamer, former Georgia assistant, who most recently has been an assistant there with the Oklahoma Sooners, at one time South Carolina assistant as well, now coming back to Columbia to be the Gamecocks head coach. And this is a little bit weird in that, after Scott Satterfield at one point in time, the Louisville coach had, denied that he had any interest in the South Carolina job. His name seemed to kind of come back up for this again. And then he kind of denied he had interest once again. They kind of went back through the paces with Scott Satterfield on this, which I thought was maybe just a little bit unusual. But ultimately, Shane Beamer was a name that I think many of us had circled for this job for a while as, if you couldn't get a Hugh Freeze and if you couldn't get a Billy Napier, then that next guy might be Beamer because he's got some experience there in Columbia, also might have the ability to hold on to some of the other assistants. Now, one of the guys he will not be holding on to is Tavares Robinson, the defensive coordinator. Beamer does fire him, but obviously a guy like Connor Shaw is going to stay. Shaw has a deep relationship with 2022 quarterback Gunnar Stockton. Does Mike Bobo get a chance to stay as offensive coordinator? We're going to find out more about that. One of the things that was a little bit controversial to Gamecocks fans about after Beamer got the job, he came into town, was there to be introduced as the coach, is actually going back to Oklahoma, I guess, to finish the season there as the tight ends coach for the Sooners, even though that South Carolina is really in kind of a dire situation regarding its recruiting class, and Oklahoma would not really appear to be any kind of playoff contender or anything like that. A lot of Gamecocks fans were left to wonder, well, wait a second, why is Shane Beamer going back to Norman here to finish that season? What does he have to play for as tight ends coach there in Oklahoma? Couldn't they do without him and let him come down here and get the South Carolina recruiting class all squared away? There had been some talk about that, but as for now, looks like that's what Beamer's going to do. So we'll follow and see, the staff that he puts in place and kind of, what this does. But Shane Beamer, the new face of South Carolina football there. As far as games on the field here this weekend, Alabama LSU, for the most part, goes exactly how you would have expected it to, if maybe a little kinder on the Tigers than ultimately you might have expected. Alabama does explode to a big lead early, content to coast after that. And, the one thing that my Twitter feed seemed to say on Saturday night, maybe yours the same way, is that the real story of this game appeared to be the role that Devontae Smith, the Bama wide receiver, played in it. Now, I still think that just because it's a quarterback's award, that Mac Jones is probably the leading Heisman contender from the Alabama roster right now. But after watching this game pretty closely on Saturday, echoing what other people are saying, I'm actually probably not quite as convinced now that Mac Jones is the best player on this team. I've given Jones credit for keeping the Alabama offense moving after losing to Tagovailoa, and I do believe that Mac Jones deserves some credit for that. But in watching some of the dazzling catches that Devontae Smith made, and just the fact that he has just shown up in a huge way each and every game, I'm a little bit more open to the possibility that not only is Devontae the best player on Alabama's roster, but arguably the best player in the country. And if you're ever going to give the Heisman to a wide receiver, this might be one of those years you would consider doing that. It was a dominant Alabama performance over LSU. And if anything, the Tigers of LSU probably got off a little bit easy, based on what some people thought was going to go down there. There had been some internet chatter about Mason Smith, the obviously five-star defensive tackle from Louisiana, very close to the Baton Rouge campus, that he was apparently there on Saturday. I guess his Instagram story kind of showed that off. You wonder for a guy like Mason, who's considering, do I want to really be a part of the LSU program? Is there enough for me here right now, post-national championship, or do I want to go out of state? Let's just say, for instance, to a school like Georgia. You wonder what that performance for LSU in its biggest game of the year against Alabama, you are kind of left to wonder what that gives someone like Mason Smith to think about right now. So pay close attention to that. Florida beat Tennessee, a little bit of a replica of some of what we've seen from Florida as of late. Kind of a slow start, coasting to an easy win after that. This one below the Vegas point spread for those of you that care about that. But a little bit like what happened against Kentucky, a little bit like what happened against Vanderbilt the week before that. And I guess to a degree, you have to include the Georgia game in that too, given the fact that Georgia got off to the 14-0 lead against Florida, and then Florida kind of bounced back after that. I don't know that we've seen Florida its best over the last few weeks, or if we have, then I think we have to assume that Florida is just a wide swath removed from what an Alabama is right now. It's not to say that Florida couldn't win in a one-game scenario against Alabama, pull a shocking upset. Stranger things than that have happened in college football. But based on what Alabama has been doing week after week after week, what Florida's been doing week after week after week, I think you're forced to concede right now that Florida's just not in the same caliber as Alabama, and frankly, maybe no one in the same category as Alabama. There was also another interesting thing from this game. Henry, is it Toto, is that how you say his last name? The Tennessee linebacker, very good player, said that he thought that Florida was play calling in such a way to pad Kyle Trask's stats. And if you go look, there were a lot of very short touchdown throws from Trask, 4 yards, 7 yards, 8 yards, things like that, essentially down near the goal line instead of getting the Florida running game involved. According to Toto, Florida was looking to get as many passing touchdowns as they could for Kyle Trask to possibly solidify his Heisman candidacy even more. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was interesting that Toto was willing to go out there and really put himself, on the record about that. Pretty interesting stuff. A couple of other SEC notes here for a moment. I thought that Texas A&M's performance at Auburn was incredibly impressive. Auburn had covered in 10 of its last 12 home games leading into this. They'd been very tough to beat in Jordan-Hare Stadium. And for a while, it looked like they were going to be tough on Texas A&M too. But A&M does pull away, comfortably winning there and really setting up Texas A&M as a legit number 5 team in the country right now and a quite viable playoff contender. It's also interesting on this, and I want to get to some of what Gus Malzahn said about the game in a moment, but let me say one more thing about the Texas A&M side before we get there. That the dominant conversation in the SEC right now, especially from a Georgia perspective, is, okay, you've got these fully evolved offensive identities. What Florida's doing right now, what Alabama's been doing for a number of years, what LSU started doing last year. And then the thought is you've got this school like Georgia that hasn't undergone the same offensive evolution as of yet. And that's kind of the predominant narrative in many cases around the SEC. But isn't it interesting that, over there in College Station, you have this other thing, right? You have, like wild extreme between Alabama, who's almost gone full on, aggressive spread style, Georgia, who's maybe starting to move that direction, but still kind of, built around some of the power running game stuff that maybe would have defined the SEC 10 or so years ago. Florida, a little bit more like a school like Alabama. But over at Texas A&M, I would argue that what Jimbo Fisher's doing offensively there is not really either one of those things. That A&M is kind of its category by itself offensively. There's a lot of 22 personnel, a lot of 2 running back sets, decent senior quarterback in Kellen Mond, but not a guy that's, really blowing you away. But A&M offensively, when you watch them closely, I think one of the things that you conclude is they are a lot more willing to just have an entirely different offensive identity than the kind of what we've come to expect from a lot of the rest of the SEC. And for now, it's really working for them. They have a very good offensive line, and they're running the ball really well at the moment. So pay close attention to that as you head towards the conclusion of the season. I mentioned Gus Malzahn. Malzahn kind of got in some hot water after the game because he was asked what his remaining goals for the season are now that they lost Texas A&M. And he said, hey, let's try to go 6-4. In a normal SEC year, it'd be a pretty good record anyway. A lot of Auburn fans were like, whoa, hold on a second now. We expect to be a lot more than that here at Auburn. We're not just trying to have a winning record in SEC play. We're trying to compete for championships. Malzahn has since tried to walk some of this kind of stuff back. But for a lot of Auburn fans who think that malaise has kind of come over the program and the Auburn Tigers have become a little bit more satisfied with less than championship expectations, the words of Gus Malzahn, whether accidentally or not, kind of open the door for what is it that Auburn's really trying to do here? And, is this a program that's still capable of competing for championships? I'll also mention here real quick that Chip Brown, who has reported on Texas football for a long time, says that Urban Meyer is no longer a candidate for the Texas job. Of course, the Texas job at the moment is also not even really open. But for now, Chip Brown says if Tom Herman is out at Texas, Urban Meyer will not be a candidate for that job after having been mentioned, pretty deeply in the rumor mill, too. This has kind of gone beyond just message board hysteria. This became a real thing for a moment, but it sounds like now, according to a guy who knows pretty well, it sounds like Urban Meyer is not a candidate for Texas. As we wrap up here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, let me also mention this, that today will be an interesting day in the SEC. Ole Miss, who has not been able to play football and is not expected to return to practice until Wednesday, they're supposed to play Texas A&M on Saturday. Vanderbilt, we know what happened to them. We're not able to play their game against Georgia this past Saturday. They've got Tennessee coming up this week. Tennessee then plays Texas A&M, close out the season. Part of me wonders, well, what happens if Ole Miss and Vanderbilt can't get back going again? Is there a chance that maybe Georgia could say, hey, we'll play Texas A&M to close out the season on December the 19th? We'll do that. If the Aggies need a showcase game for a playoff situation and Georgia just wants an opponent maybe unlike Vanderbilt, who they know will show up in Athens on December 19th. Probably not going to happen, but keep your eye on Ole Miss and Vanderbilt to see this week if they're able to get back to practice and keep the remainder, the 2 weeks that are left for most SEC teams, to see if they can keep that on schedule. Hey, thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. See you all back here again tomorrow for live coverage of Nyland Green tomorrow at 10 a.m. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Hello to everybody, and thanks for being here as we broadcast from the friendly confines of my home for a couple of more days. And, of course, we appreciate R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that for you. And they will take good care of you no matter what you might be dealing with. Air conditioning issues, probably not so much of those this time of year. Heating issues, plumbing, electrical issues. If your water heater goes out, in any case, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. So you can find them online at rsandrews.com. All right. Let's get a few Facebook comments. We'll do some YouTube comments. Let you guys get rolling here on a Monday. Kadarian Jones doesn't want just 2 more games, Georgia. He wants 4 more games. I like the idea of that. Tennille Calvino says that would be awesome. I'm assuming that's the Texas A&M thing. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. But part of me wonders, well, what if Ole Miss, who A&M is supposed to practice this Saturday, can't play? What if Vanderbilt, who Tennessee's supposed to play this Saturday, what if they can't play? What if you moved Tennessee, Texas A&M to this week, and then you said, hey, for A&M, and look, here's the thing. I really thought what A&M did on Saturday at Auburn was a pretty impressive showing. And, Ohio State, who's ranked ahead of Texas A&M right now, by blowing out Michigan State, I thought they had a pretty impressive showing. So, if A&M wants to really be a part of this playoff conversation, and by beating Auburn, they've given themselves at least an entryway into that discussion. What better way to truly validate it by going on the road and, I'm going to say from the perspective of A&M, beating a team like Georgia and in the kind of showcase game that says, hey, we're not in the SEC championship, but we're in the SEC kind of like runner-up game, the consolation game. That could be a pretty interesting, measuring stick for A&M right there. As I said before, I really don't think it's going to happen, but we've also seen, the Pac-12 play games on 48 hours notice, BYU, come to Myrtle Beach on basically a few hours notice. So who's to say how things couldn't change? And obviously, from the perspective of a Georgia fan, playing a game against Texas A&M, which would be such a measuring stick for Georgia's program, far better than playing a game like Vanderbilt anyway. Hugh Nash says, I know the Vanderbilt players were disappointed for the game. Yeah, I don't fault them for it at all. How about this? He says, my neighbor's son plays for Vandy. They were literally about to get in their car and head to Athens when they found out. Yeah, that's awful. And I've heard some similar things from certain parents this year where, school like Georgia, you've got parents that are spread out all over the country. And they obviously want to go to games. And, when they're flying and traveling and things like that, they're, in many cases kind of locked off, from social media. And so they don't hear about this stuff and sometimes until late. So there's a lot of that. And Hugh, I appreciate you sharing the story from the Vanderbilt side of, I'm sure it's incredibly frustrating for those parents getting ready to make their way to Athens and find out it's not going to happen. I've been nervous about that myself a couple times this year of, hey, I'm going to get to a place and then find out the game's not taking place. I'm always happy with Georgia. I think they do this on purpose for this very reason. When Georgia tweets out that picture of the plane taking off, I'm always really happy to see that because I'm like, okay, good. Thank goodness, Georgia's on its way here. And I think that's why Georgia sends those messages out. A lot of other programs do too. John William Adams says, do you think that Shane Beamer is a good hire? I think all of this comes down to what kind of staff he's able to hire with him. Beamer's got good coaching connections. So mean, I think you see this at Arkansas this year. Most people would say, well, Sam Pittman doesn't have the requisite experience to be a successful coach. But when you're able to hire Barry Odom as your defensive coordinator, and listen, I thought the job that Kendall Briles did on Saturday without Felipe Franks having to use a backup quarterback proves what kind of offensive coordinator the hire that Pittman made, that a lot of this comes down to what kind of staff you can put in place. And Beamer's been connected to enough programs that he's likely going to be able to build a pretty good staff all the way around. And so, that's his best chance of succeeding in South Carolina, is building that staff around him. So we'll be watching all that part of it really closely, just given the fact that he's never been a head coach and never really even been a coordinator. I don't know that I have huge expectations for him in South Carolina. I think the Gamecocks fans have rightly tempered expectations one way or another, but the kind of staff he's able to put in place, I think will go a long way towards determining that. Matt Rukavina says, how about, I should have mentioned this during the regular show too, Kentucky has let Eddie Gran go. So the Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio notion that Gran was supposed to be Georgia's offensive coordinator, he turned down Georgia. I guess in retrospect, that doesn't seem quite so true anymore. Brian Whitehead says, any chance that Mason ends up at Georgia in some role? I do know that Mason and Smart are pretty good friends, I think. And obviously, I have great respect for Derek Mason as a defensive coaching mind. I guess it's just a matter of, does Mason want to keep his name in the potential head coaching pool? If he does, then parking himself as an analyst at a place like Georgia for a little while, or any other place like that, is kind of one of the best ways to do that. But if he gets an indication of, hey, maybe I may have to rehabilitate my reputation a bit to be a head coach again, then let me go be defensive coordinator at some high level of play. And I'm sure Mason would have no problem getting jobs like that if that's what he wants to do. All right, let's do a couple more here on YouTube. Jacob Thompson mentioning some of the issues that Isaiah Wilson has dealt with. Yeah, you hate to see that, really. Scott Harris says if Gus Malzahn goes 6-4, that's $1.17 million per win. Boy, it's a very apt way to describe that, Scott, but rough situation for him there for sure. Let's get a few more here on YouTube. Cody Ledoux says UGA would lose to Texas A&M if the game were played, and I'm fine with that. There's a very good chance they would. I mean, A&M has proven itself to be a pretty good team right now, but listen, I don't think the Georgia fans are in the business of ducking any kind of games right now. So, yeah. Scott Harris says, I give Auburn too much credit. Maybe so. I mean, maybe so. It's not easy to put a winning record together against SEC-only competition, and Auburn has been pretty tough at home. I thought the win by A&M on Saturday was pretty impressive. Kevin says Andrew Thomas has rebounded and played well for the Giants the last couple of weeks. That's great to see. I wasn't aware of that. That's great to see. John Beecham says, does this mean the DawgNation Daily will start on time tomorrow? I guess we're going to actually hope to even start a few minutes early. So keep your eyes and mind on that. Noah Sheldon says, where's my gator soup? Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Oh, yeah, I should have also mentioned this as well. We'll have more time to talk about this tomorrow. Frank Patterson mentioned the idea that Scott Cochran has been a rumored candidate for the Vanderbilt job. It would not surprise me to see Scott Cochran eventually as a head coach. I almost wonder if he doesn't need to wait a little longer for a job like that. I mean, Vanderbilt, by comparatively speaking, is a pretty good job. But I do think that Scott Cochran can eventually be a head coach, and that's what he desires to be. I think that he does. I guess I'd be a little bit surprised if this could happen for him that quickly, but at least getting on that radar and starting to get some of those interviews might be a good next step there. So, yeah, we'll focus in a little bit more on that. We'll see, just how real some of those rumors end up becoming. I'm assuming that Vanderbilt wants more experience for their next head coach, but I do think this puts in place a scenario for Cochran where he does want to aggressively move up the coaching ranks as quickly as possible here. And obviously, on the basis of his first year as an on-field coach for Georgia, you can't dispute the results. UGA special teams have been really good. I think that Cochran justifiably should get a lot of the credit for that. Dog Fan 3, Tavares Cash, talking about Nyland Green tomorrow. Yeah, we're looking forward to having coverage of that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Noah Sheldon also mentioned a couple interesting names for the Vanderbilt job. One of those is Bill Clark from UAB, who I think is also one of the top defensive minds in the sport. And I think that, Clark's going to have his chance to look at some big-time jobs in the future there as well. Also mentioned Jeff Fisher as a possibility. I guess it'd be hard to go 7-9, which Fisher was famous for doing in the NFL, against a college schedule where you don't play that many games. But Fisher, who I believe still lives in Nashville, at least has certainly ties in Nashville after being the one-time coach of the Titans. Interesting to see that name pop up there. P. Rich says, what time is the Green announcement? So it's slated to go sometime right around 10 a.m. So we'll be on the air a little early to bring you coverage of that. Jay Shipe says if there was an 18 playoff, UGA would be an interesting team in that playoff. Yeah, I saw this today where Georgia is still 5th in the Sagarin ratings, to the extent that you care about those, former component of the BCS formula. So Georgia's, still got some love from the computers a little bit here. Let's see what else. Tim Tatum says, so we getting OU in the cotton? I don't think so. I think it's probably, assuming Cincinnati remains the highest rated Group of 5 team, I think it's probably Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl, which is Georgia's most likely outcome here. Now, I guess, part of you wonders, based on the fact that Coastal Carolina beat BYU on Saturday, does Coastal make a run for the top rated Group of 5 team? If so, I'm not quite so sure I love the idea of playing that Coastal bunch. They seem to be pretty feisty. But I'm guessing that Cincinnati, even with Coastal doing what it did on Saturday, probably still holds on to the ranking. And it seems more likely that it's Georgia, Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. There is at least a scenario where Cincinnati, or the highest rated Group of 5 team, could end up in the Fiesta Bowl, but it's one of those things where probably more likely the Peach Bowl. And the Peach Bowl, if it has to take Cincinnati, will then get the choice of basically who it wants to take other than that. And obviously they'd love the in-state school Georgia there. So that is probably that. Hugh Nash looking forward to the potential Nyland Green's commitment tomorrow. Should be great to see. Jeff Ingram also excited about more of Arian Smith. Yeah, I can't wait to see that too. All right, I'm going to get ready to go for today. Thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. Sorry my phone died during the cool down on Friday. I apologize for that, but we were actually back on the air. For those of you who may have seen this a few minutes later, once we found out that Georgia Vanderbilt was going to be postponed. So thanks for being here on the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Check them out online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Also check out the AJC online at ajc.com for your Atlanta News Now. Debate last night amongst two senatorial candidates. You can find out more about that. There was a rally over the weekend, kind of getting ready for the big runoff coming up in a few weeks. So read all about that online, Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. And a big thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. Check out R.S. Andrews, rsandrews.com. If you want to make sure your heating system is ready to go for the winter that's still on its way, get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. R.S. Andrews can do that for you online at rsandrews.com. Check them out. I'll see you tomorrow. A little early probably, but we'll do live coverage for you at 10 a.m. of the big announcement from Nyland Green, the 4-star defensive back, as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Have a great day, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.